I suppose there's been a lot more emphasis put on the psychological impact on the individual, right? Figuring out,
Mm.
how much like that study showed, the impact that it truly has when you have injury to your feet. Talk to me about some of the ways you help patients from a psychological point of view, dealing with injury, healing from the injury,
Mhm.
and coming back from something that can be so traumatic.
The group of injuries that we've just been talking about really are life changing. They may mean that an individual who is a manual laborer, and I class myself as a manual laborer, it's actually, so you're using your hands, your feet, your body to carry out the job that you are trained for and you wish to do. By having an injury like this, it dramatically changes your ability to do so. And having these injuries actually changes how individuals refer to themselves. How you view yourself is really anchored in the way that you relate to your body. Having injuries, it changes your body. It the the signals that you get from your body, instead of feeling strong muscles, is actually pain. That has an enormous impact on the way that you feel, the way that you are, the way that you interact with your friends, with your loved ones, with the people that you need to work with. One of the important things is to convey this to individuals. I think that when you are faced with an individual who has had a complex injury to their lower limb that requires someone like me to look after them, you do need to tell them that, look, not everything is going to be the same. So preparing them and managing their expectations is a really important part. The thing to also realize is the majority of the people who are affected by the injuries I'm talking about are young people of working age,
Mm.
from their 20s to their 60s. These are valuable individuals in our society because they're the ones whose work actually allows our society to function. So returning them to good working order is really important. And I want to start off by saying that when you look at trauma, it comes in several different categories. You have blunt trauma, which is, for example, falls, road traffic accidents, and impacts of various sorts.
Mm.
There are penetrating injuries like gunshot wounds and stabbings. There are industrial accidents where people working with machinery sustain injuries, and another group is burns. 90 to 95% of the trauma that we see is blunt trauma, which is from falls and road traffic accidents. When we look at the one of the numbers that we know is that 16,000 people die from these traumatic injuries a year in the UK. And if you imagine, if you have so many having fatal accidents, there is an enormous iceberg underneath of people who have injuries of various sorts, which are very severe but don't result in death. These individuals need a lot of care. And actually, in the UK, we have what is described as the trauma network. There are 23 hospitals with a very specialist interest in looking after these traumatized patients. Royal London being the first one and being one of four in London. And the rest of them are placed in strategic positions across the UK, so that this is what is described as a hub and spoke model. So these are 23 hubs, and the spokes, which are the trauma units outside, send the more complex patients into these centers where you have all of the various subspecialties that are required to look after these patients. The UK is really amazing in having that, and I have to shout out to Professor Keith Willett and Professor Chris Moran, who are two absolute giants of orthopedic trauma in the UK,
Mm.
and particularly Keith Willett, who was the trauma czar, was the person who brought about this MTC, major trauma centers, and this started really functioning properly from 2011 onwards. The Initial care of these trauma, of this kind of traumatized individuals in the UK is phenomenal.
Mm.
They get fantastic care. They get the initial treatment organized very well. An interesting thing about these individuals is that when you look at some of the other ways that we've looked at this data, up to 30% require further surgery on that same limb. That's a huge number.
Mm.
When you look at the most severely traumatized tibias, for example, the shin bone, there are something like a between 800 to 1,000 open tibial fractures in the UK every year. That is where the bone has come through the skin. You need a combination of vascular, orthopedic, and plastic surgeons to look after these individuals. Between 8 to 10% of these more severe open fractures end up with deep bone infection.
Mm.
Some of them end up with metalwork failure. Some of them end up with metalwork irritation underneath the skin. They may have soft tissue failure. So the skin and the soft tissue envelope around the injured bone starts breaking down, causing ulceration, causing wounds. When you look at the totality, this may be a little bit more than 30%. We don't really have very accurate data on this. So although the patients get excellent care initially, the subsequent care that they require becomes more and more complex. And that may not be looked after very well, mainly because of capacity issues.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the steady stream of the patients requiring initial care doesn't stop. So the more urgent things bump the less urgent things, and some of these patients end up with really chronic problems for prolonged periods of time. This then feeds back into some of the other things that we talked about, the psychology of it. When someone is not able to work,
Mhm.
they are not being socioeconomically productive, both for themselves and for society. That brings its own set of problems. Marriages break down, relationships break down. It becomes really quite complicated. So I work in the private sector now. I don't have an NHS practice, but in the private sector, working in London, I have the privilege of being able to look after many of these patients with some of the systems that I have set up. I collaborate with the same group of individuals that look after these patients in the MTCs in the NHS,
Mm.
plastic surgeons, vascular surgeons, um, physicians who look after the patient's physiology, physiotherapists, podiatrists, and a variety of other individuals. And coordinating this care is one of the things that I like to do. And we are able to look after these patients with their secondary problems in a way that they would be looked after in uh, the best care, in areas that provide the best care.
Mm.